Welcome to the Travelman Podcast. I'm your host, Ben, and if you're joining me for the first time, then I say a very big hello to you and thanks again for listening. If you're a returning listener, then I say thanks for returning. On today's podcast episode, I'll be talking about the limited time I spent in Cairns and the disastrous time I had on Fitzroy Island, where I got some very bad news and I had to cancel my second night there and get straight back on the Fitzroy Flyer boat to Cairns, then via Brisbane, then home to help a very sick little cat. Enjoy the podcast. So after a successful holiday in Darwin, which you would have heard about if you listened to the previous episode, it was actually now our time to leave Darwin and fly out to Cairns, where we'd initially be spending one night. And when I say we, I mean myself and my wife, so I might be saying we quite a lot. And if you're wondering, it's just myself and my wife. So the following day, we would take the Fitzroy Flyer to Fitzroy Island, which is off Cairns. If you're not quite sure, it's actually fairly close to beautiful Green Island, which I recommend for a day trip. Try and get there if you're ever up near Queensland, up in northern Queensland. Try and get to Green Island. I remember getting actually chased in the shallow reef there once by a little fish. I think it was a leather jacket. I'm not 100% sure though. But yeah, the trip from Cairns to Fitzroy Island, if you're wondering, is approximately a 45-minute long trip in a high-speed ferry. We'd then spend 2 nights on the island. We were planning on spending 2 nights on the island, then heading back to Cairns, where we'd hire a car. We'd then drive north up to Port Douglas, which is about an hour away. We had a booking at a very swanky resort, which my wife and I were really looking forward to. The accommodation we were going to stay in was via an Airbnb. It was pretty cool. Why? Because the Airbnb host, who I think from memory was Sonia, she had actually she'd bought a room at the Ramada Resort by Wyndham in Port Douglas. And at the time, I didn't actually realise that you could buy hotel rooms or resort rooms. So she had bought that room. The room comes packed with extra stuff that the standard room doesn't come with, like heaps of different upgrades, TVs, upgraded, bunch of stuff. Anyway, it was going to be the top-notch stay. We had bikes that were supplied by Sonia, all the trimmings. We had access to the resort facilities. They included the beautiful tropical landscaped lagoon pool, which was where I was going to do a lot more swimming and relaxing by the pool and a lot more reading and so forth. Podcast listening, things that I love to do. I was going to brave that warm tropical ocean water in Port Douglas. It's always about 27 degrees when I'm up there, and at the time it would still be the end of the wet season, so stingers would still be lurking in the water, but luckily they do have areas closed off in Port Douglas for swimming. The only negative to the room was that the access to the resort's room service was unavailable, but that doesn't really matter. Look, we had an itinerary which was full to the brim of activities. Some of the things that we really wanted to go and do when we were up in far north Queensland was go back to the Daintree rainforest, maybe have a dip at Mosman Gorge rock pool, which is a freshwater rock pool where none of the crocodiles can get into or access. Would have loved to have gone and check out Kansas Botanic Garden, which is pretty nice apparently. Would have headed up to Kuranda, which is a small little town, via a Skyrail rainforest cableway, those funicular type of car thing that run on cables that run right up steep embankments and stuff are very scary things, because especially when it's windy or raining, they just swing around and you feel like they could swing off their actual cables, but I'm pretty sure that's impossible. We're also going to see the Fury of Devil's Pool, aka Babinda Boulders, which I did a podcast episode on my other podcast on natural. So if you want to check the Devil's Pool episode on a natural podcast, because I talked about all the weird stuff that surrounds the lore of the Devil's Pool. It's really cool. We're also going to check out Paranella Park. Now, if you don't know, Paranella Park has an interesting Spanish-inspired building or a house built there, and it's all built out of rock and concrete. And if you were to look at pictures online, it does look like a bit of a dilapidated type of, I guess, a Spanish building that's been left just for the rainforest to just take over. Kind of something that you would see in South America, something like that, or in an Indiana Jones film. It's really cool. But yeah, it does look like it's been left unkempt for quite a while. It is heritage listed though, so it is apparently well worth visiting, and it's set up as a museum there, and you can walk around the gardens and stuff like that. So it is one of those things that we do want to do one day. So we'll get back there one day. But all these amazing things were on my bucket list, and unfortunately didn't get them done. It was going to be amazing, but things happened, and I'll get to that in a second. But unfortunately, as you hear now, we didn't do any of this stuff, and yeah, it would have been great because it would have been our big first trip since 2019, and it took the biggest of curveballs. So, oh well. So now we're at the point where we're about to leave Darwin, and we're arriving at Cairns at night. So what happened? Well, lots. Our first night in Cairns was lovely, though. No complaints. It was a Friday night. Everyone was out. We checked into our room at the Hilton, which is located by the Cairns waterfront, which is a really beautiful area. Fantastically tree-lined walkways. There are all those tropical palm-like trees planted around, the landscape garden beds. It's a beautiful boardwalk with lots of restaurants and cafes scattered around, and you've got the port there as well, where all the catamarans and all the different boats that take you out to all the different islands are all set up there. And you've got the ferries, you've got people's yachts, there's lights. The lights were actually shining off the water, and it was really, really serene. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going from Darwin, which was just amazing, to Cairns, this part of Cairns, and I was going to go to a tropical island for a couple of nights via a boat, and then go up to Port Douglas and spend 5 nights in an absolute tropical location, then fly down to our friends in Brisbane for 7 nights and just hang out. Like, it was all just looking amazing. Now, the dinner we had that night was awesome too. We had an amazing dinner at a restaurant called Vitalia's, where we both ate really well. I think I had the pasta. Don't remember what type of pasta, but it was very, very delicious. It was really warm. We were both excited. We would wake up the following morning to take the boat ride, the Fitzroy Flyer, out to Fitzroy Island. If you're in Cairns, I do recommend the Hilton. Actually stay there if you can. So that Saturday morning, we rolled out our suitcases to the ferry. We stopped off at the coffee shop to wait for a coffee. Now, this must be the best place to run a coffee shop in the world. It looks out on the docks, on the beautiful landscaped gardens. It is just a fantastic place to own a coffee shop. Unfortunately, the coffee's not that good, though. It took ages to get our coffees brewed, but, you know, we thought, oh, that's just a small little hiccup in this amazing trip that we're having so far. So it was good to see all the Australian tourists around. There was quite a lot of people heading to the boat as well. You know, it was jam-packed. They're doing really well there at Fitzroy Island. We were worried at one point that we would miss our boarding time because the coffees did take long. They actually forgot our order, so I had to ask them, look, guys, can you just hurry up? Get these coffees going, no problems, whatever. You stuffed up, it's all good. I'm not upset. So once we were all caffeined up, we headed to the Fitzroy Flyer with coffees in hand and bags in tow, ready to get on that Fitzroy Island Flyer boat. Now, we're at the point now of arriving at Fitzroy Island after a lovely, lovely boat ride. We arrived at Fitzroy Island, and when we arrived there, we really did get that feeling that we were arriving at a beautiful tropical paradise. It did really look that good. It was... Here we go. I will I'll try and describe it to you. The water was clear, crystal clear. The palm trees were lovely. It was really hard to see the resort. It kind of felt like the resort was lost behind all that lush forest and stuff. It was quite a simple boat ride to get there. They did show us a few things on the way up, like there was a couple of waterfalls and stuff that we passed when we passed parts of Cairns or the mainland. We disembarked, headed up to the wooden jetty towards the resort check-in area, so that's all fine. They said, just leave your bags here, we'll bring them up to the front desk, no problems. We got up to the front desk and we realised that this place was not very well organised because it took hours and hours to have our room ready when initially it should have been ready close to 1 p.m. or so. And after initially waiting around, we were given a voucher for delays due to the rooms not being ready. Now, I must admit, we had arrived there at around 11:30 in the morning. So, obviously, yeah, okay, I agree. Maybe the rooms weren't done yet. That's fair point. Okay, no problems. But the excuse that they gave us was the room still hadn't been cleaned properly yet. So I thought, they must be giving it a really good clean. So after about 3 hours, probably a bit more, 3-4 hours. So it was about 3 p.m. maybe in the afternoon. They told us, or maybe it was a bit later, who knows. But they told us our room was ready. So we waited long enough, 3:30 maybe it was. So after telling us that our room was ready, they gave us a voucher to use at the subpar pool bar, which also had subpar alcoholic beverages. And you know me, I love my pool bars, swim-up pool bars, always a lot of fun. But the girl there just did not seem very happy. And I feel like the staff in general weren't really that happy to be there. So while we were waiting, we decided to use the pool. So we had a bit of a swim there. The pool, unfortunately, was quite dilapidated. It was quite old. It was actually located in quite a shady and cold part of the resort. Even though it was kind of at the front of the resort, there was no sun hitting that water. And there were tiles falling off the side of it. It looked like it had seen better days. The resort also looked generally worn out and really just dated. Eventually, we got the key, though, to the room. Fortunately, a staff member helped us with our bags. He took us a pretty convoluted way, stepping over plants and pavers that weren't level, and fortunately, next door to us was a half-finished bungalow or beach bungalow, which had probably seen better days. And on first inspection of the room, it actually didn't look that clean, or it didn't look like they had a massive deep clean at all, like the receptionist had told us. The room was also very dated for a luxurious resort and for one of the best rooms at the resort because they were a beach bungalow. We expected a lot better. Mandy and I have a saying, we don't like to stay in rooms which are worse than our own, and we'd rather stay at home if that's the case, and the room was worse than our own, a lot worse for the money that we spent. I think it's $330 a night or more. So we expected a lot better. We were really, really, really disappointed, and we should have seen these alarm bells ringing, considering that my oldest brother, Matt, warned us all about it. He said we should have we should have actually followed his advice. So we should have followed your advice, Matty, but, we didn't, mate. He said, don't stay on Fitzroy Island. It's run down. It's not well looked after. The reviews say it's not very good. But, yeah. Oh, well. It's not all doom and gloom. The best part of the room was its location to the beach. Now, that was smack bang in front of the water with palm trees lined the water. There was shell coral littered all over the beach, so it was cute. It was really nice, but, I don't know, just everything else really put a dampening on it. We were within steps from the water, probably only 10 meters. So, look, that part of the room was quite nice, but, after initially being upset about our experience, we started to chirp up just a little bit. We took the glass bottom boat out. which was one of the activities that you could do on Fitzroy Island to see all the coral and stuff like that, and I thought that would be fun. The guy operating the glass boat was actually a hoot, though. He's quite a funny guy, hilarious guy, actually. He was really knowledgeable about the reef and said the water was particularly murky due to the last couple of days' rain, and, you know, that's life. I'm not going to say that's the fault of the resort, no chance, but, you know, that's fair enough. But we had a nice drink at Foxy's Bar and Cafe in the afternoon, which was enough to make us smile. And Foxy's is one of the two options that you've got when you do go to Fitzroy Island. You've either got Foxy's Bar and Cafe or the Zephyr Restaurant, which is more like fine dining. We ate there once for brekkie. But Foxy's just is a pretty easygoing place where you can have a cold drink and something to eat. I would say the majority of people go to Foxy's because it's also cheaper. So that night we went out to dinner to Foxy's and had a nice meal and drink. The best part about Foxy's is the music sung by a bearded hippie-looking fella in his 60s. He's so funny. He tried hard, playing all these songs on his guitar, trying to get the crowd going. It was really cool. It was really fun. So after a nice night, we decided to go back to our beach bungalow. It was time for bed. So this is how it went. And you may be able to categorize this as spooky, weird, strange, unnatural, like my other podcasts, or clairvoyance. I'm not sure, but that whole night I could not sleep a wink. Every time I felt that I was going to fall asleep, I would wake up straight away, like shuddered awake for some damn reason. I think it's one of the first nights on a holiday that I've remembered. There was another night actually when I was in LA once, and a night when I was in Croatia, I think. Could be France, not sure. When I felt like I just could not sleep. I was tossing and turning the whole time, and things just felt wrong. The bed, I admit, wasn't comfortable, and the pillows were horrendously flat, so I don't know if you're someone like me that likes... Well, I like a firm mattress, and I like a pillow that supports my neck and stuff, but yeah, this resort did not have the greatest of things like bed linen, and a great bed, and a great pillow. Just things that you would expect if you paid for an expensive room. But still you think, all right, I'm on holidays, it's okay, I'll fall asleep. What are you worrying about? You know, I've just come from Darwin, which was amazing. I have nothing to worry about, like I just mentioned. It's just funny that all the worries came very fast at actual morning. So the next day, I woke up. Obviously, I was already awake. But anyway, I must have gotten some type of sleep. So I woke up. Mandy and I put our names on the list to check out the island's turtle rehab centre, which they're really well known for. Their turtle rehab centre is an important part of the island, and it's home to many injured turtles, and they need help. They obviously get helped on their way to recovery, and then obviously get released. The island's really well known for having turtles frequent it. Usually, if they're sick or injured, they'll come straight to that turtle rehab centre and get fixed up and then get released, which is really cool. So we'd also planned to swim at Nudie Beach, which was ranked number 1 beach in Australia by Brad Farmer's Australia's 101 Best Beaches Award for 2018. So they had thought that was the number 1 beach in Australia, but then I did some extra researching and saw that traveller.com.au's best 20 beaches of 2020 didn't actually have that beach as a worthy top 20 participant. So it is a gorgeous beach though. Unfortunately, no nudists, and I didn't get to go there. And guess what? I didn't get to go to the Turtle Rehab Centre either. We were supposed to spend a second night at the resort, but didn't. Instead, we cancelled our second night and we're on a ferry heading back to Cairns by about 2 p.m. But why? Is Fitzroy Island that bad? Well, no, it's not that bad, and I even tried to will myself into its beautiful ocean, which I eventually did get in there. I stepped in, dipped my shoulders below sea level, had a bit of a swim, well, not really much of a swim, because the whole time I was just too scared to jump in the water, because I didn't really want to wear a stinging suit. I just wanted to have a quick dip anyway, and they do actually advise you to wear a stinger suit. There is a high chance, well, at the time there was still a high chance of the box jellyfish being in the water, and they're quite small. Well, they're not that small, I guess. The smallest jellyfish are the irukandji, and they're also in the water. But, yeah, they did say that, look, at the moment they're still getting cases of those box jellyfish being out there, and if you do get stung by them, you know, it could be life or death. You know, you could have an adverse reaction to the sting and then end up dying. So the last thing I want to do is actually die when I'm on holidays. I'm not on an episode of, Banged Up Abroad, which is fantastic anyway. So yeah, nothing like that. I didn't want to chance it, you know, I just didn't want to chance it. So that's why I was reluctant to go swimming in the ocean. But, you know, it's pretty dumb, but oh well, doesn't matter. So I was drying off and just watching the calm water for a few hours when we got a call from an unknown number. I think it was about 10:30 a.m. because we woke up pretty early, getting some breakfast and just hanging around outside of our little beachfront bungalow. And if you're wondering, the call was from the cattery in Melbourne. They said that Remy was sick. Our cat Remy, the boy, because we've got two cats, Remy and Miu. We've got a boy and a girl. He's quite young. He's about 2 or 2.5 now, nearly 3. So the call was from our cattery in Melbourne saying that Remy was sick. We actually have two cats, Remy and Miu. Remy being the boy, Miu being the girl. They were both staying at the cattery at the same time. Now, the cattery thought that he may have hurt himself. They were thinking when they last saw him the night before, he was jumping around in some of the higher type of walking areas, because they're in quite big not open cages, but quite big cages where they can do a lot of exploring and so forth. But they probably thought he just hurt himself. So they decided to rush him to the animal hospital, which is right near our house in Melbourne. And when he got to the animal hospital, he was actually much worse than first thought. The animal hospital, well, the nurse or the vet said he was actually non-responsive and very lethargic. He was very close to death. Now, the cattery said that he was fine the night before, and then all of a sudden he was just different. Before we hung up with the cattery, after they told us all that information, they said the hospital would ring us soon for a prognosis on Remy. They weren't 100% sure how good Remy was, but yeah, this was the longest couple of hours I've ever had to wait for a call, and I really didn't know what to do next, if to cancel our whole trip or come home. And this was all while we were looking at this amazing view, but all I could think about, or all we could both think about, was that we maybe have lost Remy while we had selfishly gone on holiday. Mandy and I were both in tears, and we were both very upset. We eventually got the call from the animal hospital, and, you know, wasn't the greatest call in the world. They were very fearful for Remy's life. The vet said Remy was really ill. He had a blocked up bladder and that his potassium levels were through the roof. They were kind of non-existent on the scale. They were well, if you could put it this way, they're well above the highest measurement. So these levels were extremely dangerous for him. He's only a little cat, and they gave his chance of survival very small. Apparently blocked up bladders are a common thing in older male cats, but not really common in a cat of his age, a 2-year-old cat. We do have another cat called Miu who was staying at the same cattery, who's 13, and she's never given us any health issues at all, none at all. But yeah, the vet said that Remy's heartbeat was also hard to hear, and it wasn't beating normally. He was also freezing, so they had to put him on this special electric blanket in this ICU little ward that they've got set up to get his body temperature up, and they also had to put a catheter in up his penis to relieve his blocked bladder, which is something that you'll see very often when you're got issues like that, putting catheters up there. It's very painful, and anyone that's ever had that knows how painful that type of stuff is. Now, blocked bladders, from what we were told, is caused by anxiety and stress. So obviously Remy was hating being at the cattery, and I can understand it wouldn't be great to be in a cage when he's got the whole house to himself, and he's always got us to himself. We've got Miu that comes in at night, and then we have to, unfortunately, because they don't get along, we have to lock him in a room. It's not great, but that's the way it is. He loves he loves Miu, but Miu doesn't love him, so she yells and screams at him and stuff like that. But yeah, look, I've never been so upset in my life, and I hated being on Fitzroy Island. This made me hate Fitzroy Island even more. So after a few calls back and forth to the vet, we decided to cancel our second night at Fitzroy Island and take the next available ferry back to Cairns. I actually ended up booking the 2 p.m. ferry back to Cairns, and when I got onto the ferry operator said a joke which would usually be funny, but because of our situation, made things quite worse. He said the ferry was going to Port Douglas, not Cairns, and there'd been a change in the destination. Most people thought it was funny, but I actually wanted to kill the guy. But that's all right. When we arrived back in Cairns, we checked back into the Hilton in a different room and waited for more news about Remy. Things were looking better for Remy, but he was still in the hands of the gods. We had planned a trip to Brisbane after staying in far north Queensland. Well, we were going to stay at 5 nights in far north Queensland up in Port Douglas, but obviously that's all changed, or all was changed. We changed our flights to Brisbane after being given advice that Remy would be in hospital for another few days till about Wednesday. We'd always planned on going to Brisbane to spend some time with our friends and their kids, so knowing that Remy would be in hospital for a few more days, we decided just to change our flights and fly to Brisbane and cancel the whole Port Douglas trip and so forth. So we were happy to get onto a plane and fly down to Brisbane. So initially we'd stay there for a few nights. Well, initially we'd stay in Brisbane for a few nights until Wednesday and then fly back to Melbourne. We didn't see any point on just going back to Melbourne and being in an empty house. So we thought, look, we haven't seen our friends in a long, long time, and we had some gifts for their boys, some Christmas gifts and stuff like that, or some birthday presents. So initially, back to Remy. Initially, Remy started getting better within a couple of days of hospitalisation, which was great. He's a resilient little cat. They had emptied his bladder and he was coming around. We spoke to the vet a couple more times and they said they wanted him till Friday now, so we got to move our flights to Fridays, change them again, cancelled them again, changed them again. But you know what? Jetstar were amazing. Absolutely unbelievable. They are fantastic. They did not worry that we changed our flights so many times. You know, we paid a little bit extra, but they were pretty cool with it, you know. So we ended up spending a few days with our friends. And when we got back to Melbourne, we picked up Remy. Look, before I go any further, I do want to say the worst part of the whole Remy situation was that for the couple of nights that we did stay, for the 4 nights that we did stay in Brisbane and the 1 night that I was in Cairns, they had told me to keep my phone off silent, so just in case they would call me during the night, they had access to me to give me an okay on something or a medication or to do something to Remy. But I always felt like if they were to call me at night, that this was them calling me to say, oh, Remy had passed away or something like that. So I reckon I had 5 nights of just dread. So I'd go to sleep, but I would dread going to sleep because I would fear them calling me. And that was for the 1 night in Cairns, coming back to Cairns, and for the 4 nights that I was in Brisbane, I would just fear every night going to sleep. And it was actually on the Wednesday night we started getting really good news about Remy, and then they had called us on that Wednesday night and said, oh, look, Remy, he's gone into some type of shock or something. When we took out the catheter and took out the other stuff that he was connected to, he kind of just fainted. And they said, look, we're worried that he may have septicemia, which is like a blood disease or something that, you know, and actually he could be going, you know, to heaven, to cat heaven, sooner rather than later. And so Mandy and I were again really upset on that Wednesday night in Brisbane, and luckily that night we had gotten another call just saying from another doctor, and he said, "Look, this has happened before, but all we think is that Remy fainted." So all he did was faint, and since then Remy's gotten better and better and better till now he's just back to normal, and he's being a little turd and he doesn't want to eat biscuits at the moment. So, but he'll eat ham, he'll eat cheese, he'll eat wet food, he'll eat everything else. But no, I don't want my biscuits anymore, Daddy. So back to the story. We ended up having a great few days with our friends. It was just so good. Brisbane's a great city. Wow, so much you can do. The weather's great. It's pretty. I am seriously considering the move north up to Brisbane. I would love that. But unfortunately, we've got a lot of friends and family down in Melbourne, so it would make it very difficult to move north. But if I had a choice, man, Brisbane is fantastic. It is such a lovely place. When we got back to Melbourne on the Friday, we went to pick up Remy at around 3 p.m, and he was a bit weird to start with. He was peeing on different things like carpet, and he peed on some of our luggage, which we hadn't fully unpacked. One other thing, though, the vet had told us that they reckon he'd picked up a urinary tract infection at the cattery. So between the urinary tract infection and Remy being super anxious of being at the cattery, because we know he's been pretty funny the last time we've sent him anywhere, and then we've had to pick him up. He's just been grumpy. So we believe that the whole bladder issue and the blocking up was due to Remy just being anxious, and the urinary tract infection didn't help either, because, you know, he doesn't really hang out with many cats or any at all. So it would be very easy for him to pick up something like that. Now, we don't know if it was at the cattery. We can only assume that he had picked up the urinary tract infection at the cattery, which I won't mention because I don't want to mention them, because they've been good for most of the period. It's just that point with Remy, you know. But it's been quite a few months now. Remy is back to his old ways. Like I said, he's not eating his biscuits. He's been very naughty there. But yeah, I don't know where we'll travel again, but I really want to travel. Definitely no more cattery for Remy. Maybe my nephew Adam might look after Remy. He'll come over and look after Remy instead, so we can still get out and do stuff. And that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Remember, you can always follow me on social media. Just look for Travelman Podcast. There's a group page on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter and all that type of stuff. And lastly, if you haven't heard my new podcast, Unnatural, have a listen to that. I'll be doing that by myself from now on because Steve has left the show, but it's all right. I'll try and keep that probably every 2 weeks show. I'm not 100% sure yet, so yeah, that I'll be recording an episode of that pretty soon, maybe even today after this episode. So thanks again for listening, and hooroo. Sorry, I have to stop you there, past Ben. This is now, Ben. This is 2022, and I don't think I've talked on a podcast for about 6-7 months. Probably even since, well, it would have been actually since the trip I took last year in May, I think it was May, to Darwin. So I just finished editing this episode, which I probably did about 3 months after I came back from Darwin. And it just left. It was just left there sitting, doing nothing. But there's a big reason for all of that. Now, I've moved, so now I'm not living in the same house. I've moved. I'm in a different room. I don't know what this will sound like until I've listened to it, editing it back. I've also got a baby on the way. That baby, or my wife is 33 and a half, nearly 34 weeks pregnant. So that's thrown a bit of a spanner in the works, but I do plan on getting back into podcasting, doing the Travelman podcast again. Now, I remember I said something about Unnatural. Now, Unnatural, as it stands at the moment, it is in hiatus. Unless I can find a co-host that can put in the same amount of work and have the same charisma and gel that I had with Steve, then, you know, the podcast could probably come back. Now, if I can't find that, obviously it's never going to come back. But it's funny, I look at all the podcast numbers and I just see that people are still listening to Unnatural and still loving it, which is amazing. And people are still listening to Travelman Podcast. And it's probably been 7 months for both podcasts since they've had any content uploaded to them or anything like that. So the good thing is there's still people out there that are listening to what I do, and that makes me feel really good. And considering I've got the baby on the way, I'm in a new house, you know what? I just feel good about the future. I think I'm going to do a lot of awesome trips with a small little baby. I want to be a bit like my mate Chris Rainey from Yellow Productions. He's got his lovely travelling princess who he takes overseas with him, or I think he's only been overseas once. I think he went to Hawaii. So I don't know if Chris has actually gotten out of the States, but if you're wondering, Chris from Yellow Productions, he's a YouTuber. He's one of my mates, one of my great mates. He's a fantastic man. If you ever want to look at travel content online, go on to Yellow Productions on YouTube and you'll see him. You also see a lot of stuff that we've done together. I think I would like to get Chris on to talk about how it is to now have a daughter and how traveling has changed for him. So that's probably going to happen. I'm going to reach out to Chris. If he hears this podcast, Chris, come back on the podcast. I'm going to contact you anyway. You'll come on. Let's talk about traveling with kids and stuff like that. That will be really interesting. Now, that's about it from me. I do want to bring out more regular content. So, hooroo, like I said in the past. And it's good to be back on. Bye.